All right, so good morning / afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to our Empower and Advance Leveraging Mentorship in Your ERGs event. My name is Demay Bigbuna. I'm co-founder and CMO of Chezie. For those of you who aren't familiar with our platform, my brother and I started Chezie in June of 2020, and we originally launched as a glass store for minorities with the idea that I, as a Black woman, could go find out what it's like to be a Black woman at Facebook, Google, any prospective company. So we did that for about a year. But we just found that it wasn't as scalable as we wanted it to. So we came back together in March of 2021 and we asked ourselves, how can we still help minorities within the workplace? And we landed on employee resource groups. We know that, as you all probably know, employee resource groups are the centerpiece to DEI strategy, but a lot of times they remain underfunded, underutilized, underdeveloped. So we wanted to create a platform that would help companies track and manage all things within their ERG, so events, budget, membership, et cetera, just to give DEI managers and ERG leaders like yourselves a singular source of truth when it comes to your ERGs. I won't go too much into detail, but if you'd want to learn more, feel free to contact me or my brother. I will leave our information in the chat. But with that being said, I'd love to get started with today's presenter. We do have Ashima Sharma, who is the founder of Dreami, with us today, and she's going to take us through a cool presentation, and then we will open it up for an audience Q&A. So Ashima, I will pass it to you.
Thank you. So this is one of my favorite topics ever. I love ERGs, and you'll soon find out why, because it's been a big part of my experience when I was working in corporate and before I decided to take the plunge and start my own company, and we'll get into that as well. But ERGs and mentorship, just really, really important topics here. And we can even talk about, just the structure and overall shortcomings actually as well. But before we get into that, just a really quick introduction about, my involvement with ERGs, who I am, mentorship, all these things, right? Who am I? So I'm Ashima, and I am a 5-time ERG leader. It's the first time I've actually had that as an introduction of myself. Generally, we don't really typically introduce all the ERGs that we've led, but really it has been such a big part of my professional life. Right when I started my first job at Chevron, working as an engineer, actually out in the oil fields in Bakersfield, California, up until when I went to Cisco Meraki in San Francisco and led several ERGs there. And most recently, my last role was at Zendesk, where I was involved in several ERGs there. And you can see that I was involved in the women's ERGs at several companies, the volunteering ERG, Mosaic, which is generally an ERG for those who are underrepresented individuals or BIPOC individuals. So many, many, many ERGs. And I've actually held also several different positions and roles within ERGs. So I've gotten to see how different roles and actually sub-functions within ERG works, and what the different roles entail. So I've been a volunteer chair, a community lead, a professional development lead, networking lead, and social chair. So I've really touched upon a lot of the different pillars and functions. And the really amazing part of what that has granted me, what those experiences have granted me, is really, one, I've gotten to get experience with how a lot of different companies operate ERGs, who does it really, really, really well, and maybe where there could be some lessons learned from. And so I really do believe me being leading several ERGs at different companies has allowed me to really form a really good understanding of different events that can be run at ERGs, but most importantly, how mentorship can play a role there. Touching a little bit upon why mentorship is actually a big part of what I do today now, actually comes back to when I took that first role in engineering in a more remote location out in the field, where I was really struggling to find the mentors in my career. And we actually didn't have much formal programming within the women's ERG or other ERGs as well. And I remember trying to seek out those mentors, especially since I felt like an only for a good amount of my time there. I remember trying to seek out those mentors or looking for some formal structure, not being able to find it, and actually really struggling professionally because of that. So now it is actually my passion and my mission and my dream to make mentorship more equitable, and ERGs can play such an excellent role to facilitate that and be the channel for that. But one of the biggest lessons that I've learned when I was leading all these different ERGs is that ERGs are still untapped potential. They're, a big connotation that most people assume from ERGs that, oh, it's another, channel for a Zoom happy hour in these days and prior, in-person happy hours. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the ERG traps can fall into, is that, we'll schedule a monthly happy hour and call it a day. But really, ERGs have a significant amount of potential in various different aspects in your corporation or your organization. But it does take some planning, some effort, and also just some even tracking to tap into what ERGs can really do for your organization. Let's actually talk about what that actually means. So I really want to make sure we have a foundational understanding of the value of an ERG before we get into the mentorship side of things, because I think it is important to tie into the overarching objectives an ERG can actually help to solve before we get into how mentorship aligns to that. So ERGs actually provide support, community, and resources directly to employees. And let's really make sure that we're touching upon this. Support, community, and resources. A lot of the times we do happen to see that ERGs fall more under that community sense, which is wonderful, right? A lot of us are feeling a little bit of lack of community in our workday. We're not meeting people in person as often as we used to. So it's understandable that even before COVID, during COVID, and after, when we're exploring this hybrid workplace, that community is going to be a big part of ERGs. But where we really need to make sure that what we're not forgetting about is the support and resources to the employees as well. There has been a significant amount of research that ERGs have been shown to boost the overall employee experience, satisfaction, and innovation. That last one, a lot of people don't necessarily always tie to ERGs, that there could be actually innovation that's happening because of a lot of the resources and the work and the programming that ERGs can put on. But actually, because there's this potential to have a lot of cross-departmental connection, a lot of different levels of connections as well, innovation could actually be an excellent output of the ERG experience. And most importantly, ERGs offer that opportunity to develop future leaders, upskill employees, and even develop a potential talent pipeline. We can talk about how mentorship ties into that. But I just really wanted to make sure that we have a foundation of really the extent of what ERGs can be in your organization, and then how different programming can actually help to make this come to light. So let's talk about the different pillars of ERG programs as well, and then we're going to start to funnel it into mentorship. Where I have seen ERGs do really, really well is when they have a mix of these three pillars. I've actually probably one of the best ERGs I have ever led and worked at, I guess, was the women's ERG at Cisco Meraki, where we did annual planning before we even launched any programming at the ERG. And we would actually think about these three pillars really, really deeply. And we actually structured our ERG teams to fall under these three pillars. Now, it seems obvious, right? These pillars are not mind-blowing, or they're not especially innovative, but the main difference was that we actually did put a lot of work into really thinking through and developing deeply how all of our programming, all of our events and resources somehow fall back to this or tie into this, and it's not random programming. So let's talk about the professional one, where we actually had a pretty big team dedicated to just professional programming, and we really leaned on that. And these would be the events that would get the highest turnout actually of the professional workshops that we would host, which can fall under skill development, for example, we did a lot of workshops around confidence building, brand development, as well as even negotiation workshops, along with goal planning. The second pillar is social, where you build community, and that's where a lot of those happy hours tend to generally come in, but there's deeper ways to build that community through ERGs that go beyond happy hours, and a lot of cross-departmental interactions as well, or even cross-ERG programming. And then the last pillar, which actually also would probably be the second highest in terms of attendance rate, was a lot of health and wellness programming, and even social good, such as volunteering, right? Whether that's a beach cleanup or tutoring. So I just wanted to make sure that we set the pillars of ERG programming, because this is going to now set a really nice tone for how mentorship plays into that. So if we were to take mentorship, right, for your ERG, the highlighted areas are actually all the different facets that mentorship touches, right? If you really think about it and break it down, mentorship involves it leans very heavily on that professional development, where you do have skill development, you have a lot of goal planning that's involved in mentorship, but it's more than just the professional benefits. There actually is a lot of great social benefits that come from running a mentorship program through your ERGs. You're now building community. You're now actually signaling to your employees that there is a community for you to go to when you need to build that community, develop your network inside the company in a very meaningful way where you're still accomplishing your goals. And you also have the ability, by the way, to, expand your network and community across different departments or across different managerial levels, right? So there's really nice alignment to how that falls under the social aspect of the different ERG pillars. Lastly, personally, while maybe mentorship may not tie directly to health and wellness specifically, it does tie very nicely to social good, right? A lot of the research that we've done on mentorship, and especially on why people decide to become mentors, is actually there's a great deal of fulfillment that is derived from being a mentor or even being a mentee. It doesn't actually matter which role you're falling under or what label you're falling under. A lot of the research we've done is that what really encourages someone to go out there and pay it forward and be a mentor is that there is a significant amount of fulfillment that's added to their professional work that they may not necessarily always get in the day-to-day. So I obviously feel very strongly, and the research also proves very strongly about how mentorship can touch upon these different facets and also align very nicely to these key pillars that typically govern, your ERG programming. So let's actually talk about then why mentorship actually matters, right? We all know it's a good thing. You think about mentorship and you're like, yeah, I know that's a good thing. And I probably need a mentor in my career. And, we know that we need to provide it in some sense. Let's actually talk about why mentorship matters. Well, first of all, there's a gap in access to mentorship, and that's actually a huge part of my focus and passion, where 60% of individuals don't have mentors. It's often locked behind social capital and having to know the right person at the right time and be lucky enough to stumble across them. This definitely leaves out underrepresented individuals from access to such an important resource. And that's why ERGs can actually really be that mechanism to change the statistic. I feel very, very, very strongly about this. ERGs have that potential to really decrease that number here and change this narrative that you need to be lucky enough to get the access to the career development that your employees are looking for. And how that actually ties into what you're seeing when you're looking at employee engagement data and employee engagement surveys is retention. Mentorship is proven to have a really great and direct correlation actually to retention rates for employees, because now there's a sense of community, there's access to development opportunities, and also there's that recognition, right, of alignment of goals. That development opportunity especially is not just for the mentees, by the way. I think that's a big myth that a lot of people misunderstand, is that only the mentee is the one that's developing through the mentorship. Actually, if you follow the best practices, and we'll talk through that and how to develop that structure, if you follow the best practices, your mentors are developing equally, maybe if not more, than your mentees, because a lot of the skills to be an excellent mentor and really training that muscle are very relevant and transferable skills to be an excellent manager or leader. So the development opportunities and potential are absolutely endless. And lastly, on that recognition piece, mentorship allows your employees to be recognized, right? Whether recognized for the goals that they're looking to achieve and that they're being seen and heard and they're being offered those opportunities, but also for those who are looking to become potential managers, and they've been mentioning this in their career development plans, and they're looking for those mechanisms to develop those managerial skills in a really effective manner. That you're recognizing them now, right? And even throughout a mentorship program, or after a mentorship program concludes, there's that ability to provide that recognition in a more public sense, whether at an employee town hall or a DEI leader meeting or people ops meeting, to really recognize the individuals who were involved in the mentorship program and really applaud them for all the work that they're doing. So mentorship matters, and it matters for more than one reason. I want to make sure I'm actually monitoring the chat here as well to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay, cool. So let's get into the different types of mentorship, right? There are many, many different ways that you can do mentorship. And we've done a lot of research actually on some of the more effective types, but here are just a few ideas. One is Intra Erg. I think that's the simplest one, and that's one that I've ran actually many times when I was working in corporate. So you have this within one ERG. Typically, this would work really well if you do have an ERG that's on the larger side. I would definitely recommend this for ERGs that are looking at maybe 100 plus members or so, primarily because you do want a large enough pool of potential mentees and mentors. That's something to think about as you're going out and planning a mentorship program, is the actual pool of mentees and mentors, right? And so for within one ERG, this is a really great way to just provide that opportunity for your ERG members to really get to develop their goals with each other. And the amazing added benefit is that within that ERG, there's a high probability that there's some sort of shared identity, right? There's an ability to relate. And that's really, really, really important in mentorship programs. I'll touch upon that whole process of matching, but that shared identity or that ability to relate mentee to mentor, mentor to mentee really start to dictate the engagement of the program and how successful it's going to be, and the ability for it to recur again and again and again. Now, within one ERG, what we typically recommend for a structure is, and actually for all of these, but what we typically recommend for a structure is actually first, if it is your first time, running a pilot, before you do this full-fledged, long-term ERG mentorship program, because you want to make sure that you're going into this collecting lessons learned. It's not always going to be perfect the first time around. There are going to definitely be many areas that you're going to want to expand upon down the line, or areas of opportunity to improve. But I would definitely approach, if it is your first time, launching the first cohort as a pilot. And also a little bit on the smaller side as well. And we can talk through those numbers if anyone is curious about it. Then getting into another type of format that isn't leveraged as much in the corporate environment, but I think actually has an even larger opportunity to hit all those different objectives that I was lining out earlier, is inter ERGs, between multiple ERGs, right? I think one thing that I remember being an ERG leader, whether it was for the women's ERG or for Mosaic or for the volunteering ERG, is that we were always looking for ways to actually come together and really leverage each other's time, energy, and even resources, right? There's a certain budget all of us are allocated for each separate ERG. And we were always trying to figure out ways that, was there an opportunity for us to figure out some programming that allow for all of us to come together, pool our time, energy, and even budget, and actually impact all the ERGs at once. And we actually never really cracked that code. But now that I'm on the other side and all I do is think about mentorship programs and, work with ERGs and other organizations, and really excellent way to do that is to have an Intra Erg mentorship program. This really starts to really facilitate that cross-departmental, collaboration, that potential for innovation as well to come out of the ERG, and just really start to signal again to employees that there are many different ways for them to tap into the resources that they're looking for, and that there's many different types of employees that can participate in these resources as well, right? You want to definitely make sure that definitely appealing to being as inclusive as possible when you're working with different ERGs and really facilitating that amazing collaboration that can happen. And I really do recommend this for maybe ERGs that are on the smaller side. If you take each individual ERG, where you may not have as large of a mentor-mentee pool in each individual ERG. So for those who are maybe startups, right? You're a growing startup, or you're a smaller organization in general, or you're just launching your ERGs and maybe adoption is taking some time. Very, very normal, by the way, or it's a grassroots employee-led ERG. Having that inter-ERG, connection is going to be a really, really seamless way to launch a mentorship program. So then, talking about the last one, the ERG to community. I actually rarely see this. But again, we're coming back to my main insight and experience that ERGs are largely untapped. So that's why Chezie exists. But ERG to community is a huge untapped potential opportunity to appeal to employee engagement, employee development, and community belonging as well. So what I actually mean by this is that for a lot of organizations, let's say you have a corporate social responsibility arm, or maybe you have an ESG arm, or you have some sort of volunteering or social good team. Generally, I'm assuming that you most likely have a list of community-based organizations that you're providing some sort of sponsorship to and support to, right? But where really the untapped opportunity here is engaging your employees to mentor participants of a community-based organization. And now you're really starting to tap into a lot of the different facets that mentorship provides, right? You're developing your employees because they're getting a sense of what does mentorship look like for those who are maybe not internally in the company. You're getting into employee volunteering and engagement, and you're providing a more direct line of support actually to these community-based organizations that actually typically struggle to recruit mentors. I'm working with them day in and day out. I work with a lot of nonprofits actually. One of their biggest struggles is always recruiting volunteers, recruiting mentors. So this is a really nice way to have your ERG really involved with the community-based organizations that you're supporting, and that may be aligned to the mission of the ERG itself. Just making sure I'm monitoring the chat here. Because I'm seeing, I'm seeing a lot of questions. I'm probably going to wait to the end of this because it might take me some time to read through all of this.
Yeah, Ashima, I'll facilitate a Q&A at the end.
Perfect. Okay. Yep. I saw a few paragraphs there, so I think I'll keep going and we'll wait until the end here. But I'm excited that there's questions. I love this topic, so I can talk about this all day long. Okay, so we talked about a few different types of the formats of the mentorship programs that you can run. Let's actually talk about how you're going to start, right? I think that was actually one of my biggest pain points when I was an ERG leader, and I was tasked to run kind of like a speed mentorship program. without much guidance. I was there, it was just something that we did every year. I actually didn't even know why. I don't even know how it was going to help people. I don't even know if the past ones were successful or not. And these are things that I'm going to talk about in best practices. It was just something that we did. So I was handed that task to run a speed mentorship program. And I remember one of my biggest difficulties was, one, I already had a really busy job. This was like probably one of the busiest seasons of my job. And I remember not having actually any best practices to work off of, no templates to help me understand what, how I should be running this. And then no prior data to help me inform how I'm supposed to be improving this. So a lot of what I'm going to be walking you through is just things that I wish I had known when I was that person, kind of assigned that task without really much of a roadmap. So what I recommend, the roadmap to start is, one, you kind of make your decision off of, the format of the ERG mentorship program that we talked about on the last slide. But now let's actually get into, let's say you have an idea of the actual format that you want to run, what actually happens next. You need to plan. It might be the ERG leader who's planning it. It might be the DEI leader. It might be the people ops leader, whatever your organization looks like. But I recommend to whoever is tasked with or is interested in running this program, please provide or please allocate time to plan, because, and I'll get into this, mentorship programs can be chaotic if not done without the appropriate planning. You need to spend time to plan quite a few things out. We'll most likely get into this, but I'm talking about what is even the objective of this program, right? A lot of the times when we're planning out ERG programming, it doesn't even have to be a mentorship program. But one of the things that are often forgotten about is, what's the objective of this? What's the purpose? How does this align to the business's OKRs? How does this align to the ERG's OKRs if you had set them out when you did some annual planning for the ERG and budgeting and all those things? So allocate time, upfront time to planning. You'll also want to get a good idea of what does the structure look like. So not even intra, or ERG to community. I'm talking about like the duration of the ERG program, the cadence that you're going to be suggesting, the guidelines that you're going to be providing to your mentors and mentees, right? All these different components. You want to spend some time, like I would put in the time to definitely plan all of that out, because you need to be on the same page of what this is accomplishing, but also your participants, your actual mentors and mentees, and your executive sponsor, they all need to be on the same page of what you're aligning out here. And that really helps us set, a foundation for really good lessons learned as you expand. The second thing is the matching, okay? Matching is quite possibly the most important part of a mentorship program. It actually doesn't matter if it's within an ERG or your company in general, or if anyone here is working at a nonprofit or community-based organization, it doesn't matter. Matching is the most important part of a mentorship program. I learned this the hard way when I was coordinating that speed mentorship program, where I was trying to figure out and basically play a Tetris game of the different leaders who needed to be matched to the different employees who were signing up with them, and trying to figure out all the different alignment. A lot of the feedback we would get afterwards was, well, this actually felt like more of a check the box experience because I wasn't matched to the right person. So we spent 30 minutes talking out who knows what, not really actually making progress on the goals that I'm looking to achieve. And that is the last thing that you want to happen, is that all this time and effort and energy going into a mentorship program that feels like a check the box experience. And maybe some of you all can relate to that, maybe having been a participant of a mentorship program in the past, where you got matched to someone or assigned to someone, but not much really is relevant in terms of the actual goals and topics and skills that you're looking to discover and looking to develop. So a lot of effort and time and energy needs to go into the matching process, which at Dreami is something we've spent a lot of research perfecting. And then lastly is tracking. So data is everything. And this is coming from a person, who did a very data-driven role, but it doesn't matter. For ERGs, I think a big missed opportunity, and one of the areas that I saw firsthand that is untapped potential is just getting really clear on the data of the effectiveness of the programming and efforts of the ERG itself. Oftentimes we would be hosting a lot of different programs or webinars or events without ever tracking just even basic, NPS scores, or, just basic satisfaction scores afterwards, just to understand, did all of our energy, time, and even budget go into something that was actually helpful for our employees? So tracking, that you need to think through a mechanism to track the effectiveness of the mentorship program, and the different types of metrics that you want to look at to track the effectiveness of a mentorship program. Because one, this will help you understand, yes or no, was this actually helpful for the employees who participated? But two, you also want to report out internally to your stakeholders, right? Whether your stakeholder is your CEO, or whether your stakeholder is your chief people officer or your DEI leader, whoever it may be, you need to report out what the mentorship program actually did, because there, again, a lot of potential opportunity for what the mentorship program can achieve. And there needs to be a clear measurement of what that ROI looks like, so that if it did do its job, if a lot of people came out of that saying, oh my gosh, yes, I would totally recommend this, and I want to be a mentor the next time around, you need to prove that, right? So that way there can still be budget that's allocated for the next time around when you plan to expand it, or other ERGs plan to adopt it. So those hopefully didn't overwhelm you, but these are just steps that I wish I had before we went out and just started putting out a bunch of programming and throwing calendar invites on everybody's calendar for different events, especially on the mentorship side. Okay, so key lessons learned. We talked about the matching process being the most important step. But one thing I do want to almost comfort you all is that process and planning is absolutely necessary. If you don't have it, chaos is inevitable. So if any of you have gone through a mentorship program and it felt chaotic and it felt unsustainable and it felt unscalable, I understand. I completely understand that. That's what we hear every day, day in and day out, that it can be quite chaotic. I think the hardest part about the mentorship program, matching quite possibly takes the most amount of time, if you're investing a lot of the effort into it. But actually, where a lot of the chaos happens as well is after you do the matching, right? When the mentors and mentees get introduced to each other and they get matched to each other, and now they're having mentorship sessions. That chaos is inevitable is likely to happen after that matching process. And that's why I'm just really harping on a lot of that process and planning ahead of time. So the other point that I want to mention on, and it comes back to the tracking and the metrics, is that you need to think about what are the metrics that matter to your organization, and specifically, what are the metrics that matter to your ERG. It is crucial that you set these metrics in your process and your planning phase before the mentorship program even kicks off, because ideally what you're going to want to do with your data is take a snapshot before your program has officially kicked off, right, with your participants in terms of specific KPIs that you're looking to track. Take a snapshot at the midpoint, and then take a snapshot at the end point. So that way you have several touch points of, how those different KPIs that you've determined at the beginning. And then you're able to start tracking that delta a little bit effectively. What we do at Dreami is a little bit more involved. We actually are tracking the starting point, midpoint, and end point for our metrics. And we do actually help to, recommend specific KPIs for you all. But what we do one step further is that we're also tracking metrics after every single mentorship session. So we have a daily pulse check on how the mentorship program is going, to really just make sure that we're not missing out on mentorship sessions that aren't going well, matches that maybe weren't satisfactory, right? People who feel like they're not making progress on their goals. So we're able to track that immediately in the moment. versus you waiting until 2 months into a mentorship program. And now someone's saying that, they aren't making the progress on the goals that they would have liked to. So I can't harp on enough also on the importance of really determining your KPIs ahead of time and having that mechanism to track that. A lot of people take a little bit more of that manual route of, emailing out a survey. Works for smaller programs. As you scale, you may need to think through more scalable mechanisms. Okay, last point, the biggest lesson learned actually, now that I've ran mentorship programs internally in a company, and now that's literally all I do all day long, be prepared to see a ton of demand. There will most likely always be a lot more demand than supply. In this case, demand is equivalent to your mentees, supply is equivalent to your mentors. We come back to that 60% of individuals have never had a mentor before, and that actually aligns very well with the actual users on our platform. It's real. People need that guidance. People are looking for that person in their career, that personal board of directors, right? That sounding board, they are looking for it. And once you open up potential for a mentorship program, you will see a lot of demand. And so my biggest recommendation and lesson learned is prepare a plan to manage that. I don't want you all to be caught off surprise if you see, hundreds of people, for example, saying that they all want mentorship. So it is important to prepare a plan of how you're going to manage that, how you're going to communicate that effectively to employees, right? So that, it's just expectations are set ahead of time. And that, that has been clear from the get-go. And from the Dreami end, we have a lot of ways that we actually mitigate that as well, because it's always see that a lot of organizations see a lot of that spike in demand, and they're trying to regulate, how many mentors can actually realistically be mentoring at one given time. So there's a lot of different mechanisms that we've implemented that have helped out with that demand. Okay. So coming back into the scaling and just my personal experience, I never really had this framework, right, for the different types of mentorship programs that can exist. What is the most effective way to do it? What are the steps to plan it? The fact that I should even have been looking at data so that when my DEI leader or my executive sponsor comes up to my desk and they ask me how the program is going, I could have a clear answer. I mean, I have been there. I have done that. I've been that person who received hundreds of emails asking for updates of when was I going to get my match? When would the program kick off? When can I join? So I know I really, really know the inner workings of how difficult this can be on an employee who's trying to manage their day job and do well at that, but also is very passionate about, providing the other employees in the ERG, access to opportunities and, working later nights to make that happen. And I remember working out of oh my gosh, so many different Google Sheets with so many different tabs, trying to do the matching process, 3 different forms, trying to reconcile all the different responses, the slide decks to give an update. So I just want to say, I realize how difficult this was. And so if there are ERG leaders in the room right now listening to this, or DEI leaders or executive sponsors, just please recognize the amount of effort and work that your employees are putting into putting this on. And I would recommend finding ways to support them because it's not enough. One person, it's just not physically possible for one person or 2 people on an ERG team to put this on. Quite frankly, now it is very, 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 very time intensive. While the results are great, very, very time intensive. So this gets into why I even started Dreami in the first place. For those who maybe came in a little bit late, a lot of the reasons, a lot of my experience with the lack of mentorship and what I was looking for in my career was when I was working out in the oil fields, and I was an engineer, and there were very, very few female engineers. There were very, very few people of color. And so it was very common for me to feel like and only. And I know that's a very relatable experience as well for a lot of you. And I remember trying to go to my ERGs, right? Looking for anyone who could be my mentor, who could really just help me feel more comforted that what I was going through was normal and that I have the capacity to survive in such a harsh industry. And there wasn't that formal structure of support. There just frankly wasn't, because of it, exactly the reason that I just lined out one slide earlier, because of how much work and how difficult it was and how unscalable mentorship programs were. A lot of ERGs just stopped providing them. So a lot of what I do now is I just see a world where I can move that 60% of individuals who don't have mentors today down to zero. And the way that I'm doing it and the way that we're tackling this at Dreami is let's streamline and automate and make running mentorship programs so much easier so that more people can have access to such an incredible resource that can change their career trajectory. So very briefly, and if anyone's curious, happy to share more, but just very briefly, at Dreami, what we do help out with is that pre-program planning, especially if it's your first time running a mentorship program. We have the best practices. We provide that recommendation on the program structure, the KPIs, all that great stuff so that the program is set up for success. But most importantly, we have the software to help with all the mentor and mentee management, the matching, where we've been receiving 90% match satisfaction scores across the board, which is super exciting. The onboarding, the mentor-mentee training. We train our mentors and mentees live and with resources, and that's been incredible for the engagement of the program. And then most importantly, the tracking analysis, because we have a daily pulse check on how the program is going and provide that and summarize those outcomes in case studies for you to report out on. So just a brief overview of what we do, but a lot of this comes from passion. A lot of this comes from just the real pain point that I've felt in my career and that I've heard time and time again from hundreds and hundreds of individuals that we've interviewed and now thousands of users on our platform. So yeah, it's just to really move that needle and provide equitable opportunities for career development. And one thing that I'll just end on, I know we're heading on the 45-minute time mark here. One thing that we actually integrate into everything at Dreami, and especially when we're empowering our mentors to be great mentors and we're empowering our mentees to be great mentees, is this concept of together we are limitless. My name in Sanskrit means limitless. And it's something that I felt the complete opposite of when I couldn't find those mentors and I felt so limited in my career. But the whole governing part about Dreami is that, with the right resources in hand and with the right support structure, together we can be limitless and together we are. So thank you so much. I love this topic. I could keep going on, but I'll stop there. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I think this was a really great presentation, and just looking at the chat, we got a lot of great feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and read off some questions, if that is good with you.
Yep, let's do it.
So first question from Desmond: how do you drive engagement in mentoring programming? We have a hard time getting our employees and ERGs sign up for things. I wanted to know how you combat this.
Yeah, so a lot of people, I think when they see a mentorship program, they do start to think of this as just another check the box experience. And I think it's really important to actually first tell mentors the incredible potential for those who are looking to become potential leaders, who are new managers, or even who have never really received formal training on being a leader or mentorship, that this is your opportunity to really develop those skill sets in a meaningful way. And that's why we actually place a lot of effort on the mentorship training, right? That's why we actually do live training with the mentors, and we actually meet one-on-one for 15 minutes with the mentors who participate in our program so that they feel supported, and that this is also a way for them to achieve goals of their own through the mentorship program. As a part of our matching process, we actually ask them, what are your goals for the program? And that's something that we take into account as they're going through their journey with their mentee and in the matching process to make sure that they are also developing as they're going through it. At the end of the day, engagement comes down to perceived value, right? The participants or potential participants need to understand, where is my time going and what value does this provide? And so a lot of our messaging, especially when we're launching it for the first time ever, a lot of our messaging is really honing in on what we've seen from past users on how this has helped someone get that promotion that they were looking for. This is to help someone get that confidence that they've never had. This has helped someone realize that, yes, they do actually have the potential to close the skill gaps that they need to be a manager, whatever it may be, but it really comes down to perceived value and how effectively you communicate that.
Next question is from Tiffany. She says, you spoke about mentors having the ability to relate. Within ERGs, is there a screening/application process for those who would like to be a mentor?
Yeah, so at least from the process that we take, our mentors fill out a matching quiz. That's the most effective way for us to understand where they're at in their career, what skills they feel like they can provide guidance on, and actually what goals they would like to develop. And that is so key, that you're not just asking the mentees that, you need to be asking your mentors the very similar questions as well, to enable the most effective matching and that ability to relate as well. The closer that the mentor can relate to the mentee, and we help to enable them this in their training, but the closer that the mentor can relate to their mentee, the more engaged both will be. We've actually asked mentors, what brings you back to become a mentor again? Why, you've gone through the mentorship program once, and we noticed that you're coming back and you're being a repeat mentor. We love this, but we want to know why. And one of the most common answers was the quality of the match that I was given. Like, my mentee was perfect for what I feel like I can provide guidance on, and it made me feel like I can actually help someone. That's what mentors at the end of the day really need to understand and believe, that they actually have that potential to help someone. And when they get that match that enables that, they're signing up again and again.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? What data points are you all using to determine who would be a good match?
So in our process, we actually take a pretty customized approach to understand that, because it really does come down to the objectives and the overall KPIs that you're planning to track at the beginning of your program. So for us, for Dreami, we take a more customized approach. The general, I think more general matching quizzes, where I'm not sure what their match satisfaction can be, but general ones I would assume are looking at, the departmental experience background, number of years of work experience, their educational background, things like that. But we take a pretty in-depth look into matching when we're creating these matching quizzes, because we believe that it actually does need to be pretty customized.
Thank you.
So you just touched on KPIs. So Tiffany asks, outside of satisfaction surveys, what are good ways to measure the success of ERGs and or mentorship programs?
Yeah, so let's talk about the mentorship programs, the ones that we track. And I think I saw someone asking this of what are you tracking on that per session or a daily basis? For us, what it comes down to is, how helpful was the session for your goals? How much progress do you feel like you're making on your goals for the program, which is key, because at the end of the day, you want to definitely see that they're, close to accomplishing, if not accomplish, their goals by the end of the program. And 3, how satisfied are you with your mentor match? Now, we do have a few other metrics that we track as well, but these 3 are kind of the base foundation for what we're tracking on a per session basis to really understand and get that post check on how that program is going regularly for our participants. For the ERGs, that's a really interesting one, because that's something that I didn't see, right? That's something I didn't see out in the field when I was actually an ERG leader. Now, what I really would have, I think the really basic, a really basic place to start, though, from what I would assume, is some form of NPS. Not everyone is a fan of net promoter scores. I know that it can, have wide variability, right? So it doesn't always tell the full story, but some sort of sentiment about how likely are you to recommend this ERG, or how valuable is this ERG for your personal, professional, and social goals, or something like that. It's just a really good foundation and a basic first step to understanding the effectiveness of an ERG.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that, we do recommend doing NPS scores, especially for events. Getting that NPS score and getting that feedback helps you iterate on those events and the programming that you're doing. But also, if you're looking for long-term KPIs to track, you can track retention rates compare people who participate in ERGs to those who don't. You can also look at promotion rates. And that's probably something that feeds into mentorship as well. But seeing how likely someone is to get promoted if they participate in an ERG versus otherwise.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. I love the retention rates too. It could be just even like retention of like events, how over time, right? I think that's an excellent one as well.
Moving it to Natasha's question, paraphrasing, but when have you seen ERGs run mentorship programs versus the company running them for ERG members?
Yeah. So coming back to the case where I was that person running it, this was for our Mosaic ERG, I believe. And we were at a place where the Mosaic ERG was huge. I mean, I'm sure that the entire ERG membership was now heading into maybe 800 or maybe 1,000. And so that was huge for where we were at as a company. A lot of interest in the ERG. And at that point, it was very clear that the members of the Mosaic ERG, which for those who joined late, the Mosaic ERG for us was generally for those who are BIPOC individuals. The reason why we had it for that ERG in particular is because it was clear from the event request surveys that we would send out that people were looking for a mentorship program within that ERG specifically. They wanted to connect with other BIPOC individuals as their mentors specifically, really just open up about shared experiences. So I think a good place to start on whether you're looking to run a mentorship program for your overall company versus an ERG in particular, go back to your data. I think if you have ran an employee engagement survey, and there most likely there's questions around the needs for employee development or employee engagement, or sometimes some organizations to ask specific questions about their ERGs. I think that is always a good place to refer back to in terms of what are your employees saying about what their needs are, and if you're seeing a lot of requests for mentorship programs within an ERG in particular, that there's demand there for sure. I will also say for smaller companies, let's say you're at a company that's like in the low several hundreds, maybe you're at 1,000 now. It makes more sense to do a company-wide mentorship program, primarily because of just the volume, right, and the size of the company in general, and where we've seen a lot of effective intra ERG programs where, when we start to see pretty significant volume in the ERG member base itself, because you do need to think about, the potential pool of mentors and mentees and having enough, essentially.
Awesome. I think we have time for a couple more questions. So there's a question from Jeff. It's a long one. So a big challenge I'm running into is supporting my colleagues leading our ERGs with engaging our members on top of their daily jobs. Ideally, I would like to get to a place where we're compensating leaders for their involvement, and we're not there yet as a company. How can I communicate to my ERG leads and their general body members the importance of getting involved in things like mentorship and being leaders in their groups?
Oh, that is such a good question, Jeff. Yeah, and I know that at the time when I was working, corporate compensation for ERG leaders wasn't yet a thing, and I think that has started to become, more of a norm, which is wonderful. Only in the recent, last 1 or 2 years, perhaps. And I know a lot of companies aren't there yet, so that's totally, normal place to be. So look, here's what I wish, just speaking from an ERG leader, what I wish was communicated to me and provided to me if it wasn't compensation. I would have loved recognition. And that's something that I mentioned in my presentation. I put in a lot of time and energy and resources and just even weekends, putting together some of those mentorship programs, those extra events. And I think recognition from my executive sponsor, maybe even in an employee town hall or something that, just was widely recognized, would have gone a long way personally, right? I don't have research to back this up. I think it does come down to what is each individual person fueled by, and what, drives them and motivates them. I'm just talking personally, what would have been really rewarding for me was just that more broad level recognition, and it signals to other employees that, by the way, all this work is reaching, the senior leaders are recognizing and realizing that this is actually an effort, right? The second thing that I would recommend is you give exclusive access to your ERG leaders to mentorship or sponsorship opportunities, right? You connect them with your executive leaders for a more intimate one-on-one mentorship or sponsorship or career coaching opportunity. They're getting that development. They're getting it from, the leaders of the company. It really funnels that really nice recognition. So I would think about that because, it's important to recognize that they're leading this ERG for a reason, and they're looking most likely to develop themselves professionally and personally, and adding that in could be a really nice way to augment that.
Yep. And just again, to add, including ERG participation or leadership in performance reviews is also a nice way to incentivize leaders to stay and to prevent some of that burnout that they can experience. Okay, last question. It's kind of a combination of from Beth and Kylie. What is the ideal duration of a mentor-mentee relationship?
So we actually, I might get annoying for saying this answer a lot, but it does come back down to your program objectives and goals, because you could have a mentorship program where this might be heading into more of a sponsorship program, and that's a whole nother topic to talk about. But you may have that objective that you want to see, your ERG leaders, especially high potential ones, start to head into and get promoted into leadership roles, right? In that case, then, you would want a little bit of a longer duration of a mentorship program, because you won't accomplish that in only 2 to 3 months. But if this is more of a mentorship program to facilitate community and also to really just foster connection in a meaningful way, then we would recommend a quarter length program. It really comes down to your program objectives and the really what you're trying to move the needle on here. Now, broadly speaking, if this is your first time running a mentorship program, I would recommend shooting for a shorter pilot just for your first ever one, because you don't want to invest a significant amount of time and energy to a pilot where the main purpose is to really gather a lot of feedback, iterate quickly, just like how you would in software development, iterate quickly, and then, really take those learnings into a more full-blown rollout. So generally what we do recommend, again, I would love to know your objectives there, but generally what we do recommend is a quarter length. And I do also have recommendations on the time of year that you should be thinking about as well, but I think we're heading short on time here.
Yeah, so I'm going to end on that question. Ashima, thank you so much. This was awesome. The feedback that we're getting again in the chat is just really speaks to the power and the significance of this presentation. If you want to contact either of us, I've dropped our websites in the chat, and then I'll do some follow-up as well and send out this presentation, a recording, and then links to get in contact with us. So thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.